Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating basketball phenomenon. How some seemingly subtle rule changes can completely radically transform the international game when you compare it to the NBA. I mean, have you ever watched a massive global tournament like the World Cup and thought to yourself, wait, why does this game feel so entirely different right now? Well, we're gonna break that all down. You know the feeling. You tune into the Olympics and you just wonder why the absolute best athletes in the world suddenly struggle to drive to the hoop or hit their usual shots. We're talking about elite, top-tier superstars who literally dropped 30 points a night in North America without breaking a sweat. Yet you put them in a national team jersey and their normal scoring lanes seemingly vanish into thin air. Their rhythm, it just completely disappears. It isn't a sudden drop in talent, right? They haven't magically forgotten how to play basketball overnight. It's actually something much, much deeper. To really understand why the game looks fundamentally different, we have to look at the rulebook written by FIBA. So FIBA is the governing body for almost all international basketball outside the NBA. And yeah, that includes the Olympics and the World Cup. They have their own distinct way of running the game. While the very basic goal of putting a ball through a hoop is obviously the exact same, the framework around it is surprisingly different. All right, moving to section 1, shrinking time and space. Think about an NBA game. It basically runs like a marathon, 48 minutes long. FIBA, on the other hand, plays for just 40 minutes. Now, having 8 fewer minutes might not sound crazy, but it makes every single possession exponentially more dangerous. Coaches have way less time to recover from mistakes, and those momentum swings, they are incredibly deadly. Teams simply cannot survive long stretches of poor execution, and they definitely can't playfully waste possessions like they occasionally do during a long NBA regular season game. In a 40-minute sprint, every single trip down the floor carries massive, game-altering weight. And it's not just the clock. The physical floor literally shrinks as well. 6.75. That is the exact distance in meters of the FIBA three-point line, which is significantly closer to the basket than the NBA's 7.24 meters. Now, it might sound like just a half step of difference, a tiny detail you'd barely even notice on TV, but this physical shift fundamentally changes the geometry of the entire court. Because that three-point line is pulled inward, the court effectively shrinks. Defenders just don't have to guard shooters quite as far out, which means the defense stays incredibly compact. In the NBA, you see these enormous, sprawling driving lanes that allow unbelievable athletes to just isolate and score one-on-one. But under FIBA rules, those lanes are completely clogged up. Penetration becomes an absolute nightmare, meaning rapid ball movement, precise screening, and flawless tactical execution become absolutely critical if you want to get a good look at the basket. Which brings us to section 2, defending the paint. So in the NBA, defenders can't just stand in the paint all day without actively guarding someone, right? That triggers a defensive 3-second violation. Well, FIBA doesn't care. There is absolutely no defensive 3-second rule. None. Centers can literally pitch a tent and anchor themselves right near the rim permanently. This turns the paint into a heavily protected, impenetrable fortress. Help defenders are always waiting inside, allowing international teams to rely on really aggressive zone defenses that completely pack the paint. It is exactly where traditional NBA slashing goes to die. And then there's the rim itself. Under NBA rules, there is an imaginary cylinder above the hoop. Once the ball is on the rim, it is totally off limits. But in FIBA, absolute chaos. Once that ball hits the iron, it is immediately a live ball. You can swat it away, you can tip it, or you can slam it right back in. This creates these split-second, incredibly physical rebounding battles where big men are just snatching the ball directly off the rim. It drastically accelerates second chance opportunities and forces players to react instantly the very second a shot goes up. Let's move on to section 3, physicality and tactical flow. Let's talk about the rhythm of the game, because these strict game flow rules create a continuous, grinding tactical rhythm. First up, notice the foul limit. Players foul out at just 5 fouls instead of 6. That forces aggressive defenders to be incredibly disciplined right from the opening tip. Next, look at the timeouts. Instead of those frequent, flexible breaks you see in the NBA to stop an opponent's momentum, FIBA coaches usually only get 2 in the first half and 3 in the second. And crucially, they can only be called during a dead ball. Add in a much stricter interpretation of traveling, where those famous NBA-style gather steps are routinely penalized, and you have a game that demands constant, exhausting precision from start to finish. The FIBA game is also just incredibly physical, especially away from the ball. Referees allow defenders to really physically fight through screens and heavily bump cutters trying to move through the lane. pure scoring requires a massive amount of effort. Because of this on-court chaos, highly organized team execution directed meticulously by the coach becomes the only way to survive. International coaches exert huge influence here, calling offensive actions possession by possession. European teams, for instance, will spend years developing intricate chemistry within these strict systems, prioritizing deep organizational execution over pure improvisation. Finally, Section 4, the resolution, where we get our superstar mystery solved. Usually the explanation is not talent, it is environment. That quote pretty much hits the nail on the head. When an NBA superstar steps onto a FIBA court, they aren't facing less talent. They are facing an environment engineered from the ground up to limit isolation and reward collective execution. The smaller court, the packed paint, the heavy physical defense, every single possession turns into a grueling tactical battle. FIBA ultimately rewards deep team chemistry and tactical awareness way more than individual brilliance. So, knowing how vastly these rules alter the actual strategy of the game, how will you watch the next Olympic basketball match differently? Will you be looking for those centers camping out in the paint, or maybe waiting to catch a game-changing live ball swat right off the rim? For sure, the next time you see a superstar struggling to score on the international stage, you'll know exactly why. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and enjoy watching the next massive international tournament.